Join us in this episode to experience the reality of life on board in the Arctic, as we share how we stay warm on board, look out for Svalbard's iconic polar bears, and have to race back to rescue Florence from encroaching ice.
Yeah, Matt just spotted a polar bear.
We are Amy and Matt. This year we have sailed our 40-year-old 37-foot sailboat 2,400 miles from the south coast of the UK all the way north to the high Arctic.
Here we are exploring the icy land of Svalbard, and having an experience we can barely believe is possible.
This is what it's like to sail your own boat and explore in the high Arctic.
We're now at 79 degrees, 20.83 minutes north, which, to put that into perspective, it's about 260 miles further north than the most northerly point of the Northwest Passage. And the only way that we've been able to get a fiberglass boat like Florence this far north is because of the warming effect of the Gulf Stream. And that means that in the midsummer, it pushes the pack ice up to around 81 to 82 degrees north. So it would be possible for us to sail a little bit further north, but we have decided that this is the point that we are going to turn around and start the journey south. And there are a number of reasons for that. So the first reason is that recently there have been some strong winds which have been blowing big chunks of ice out from the glaciers out into the open water. And in waves, those large chunks of ice are much more difficult to spot. So that poses a much bigger risk of us hitting any of that ice.
Secondly, we need to get back to Longyearbyen to hand in our polar bear protection rifle, because unfortunately it's not possible to extend the amount of time we have it hired for from the hire shop. And the forecast for the next week or so is for strong winds from the south, so the further we go north, the more difficult it's going to make it to get back to the hire shop in time.
But there's still lots to see on our way south. We are yet to see a polar bear, so we're going to be keeping a very close lookout on the shore as we sail south.
Today we're going to carefully work our way out of this anchorage, past the glacier ice in the fjord, and tack our way south.
Sailing out of this fjord, we're having to keep a very careful lookout for ice, because there are a lot of small pieces around, which, although small, could still do some damage if we hit them at speed.
This is more what I imagined Arctic sailing to be like. Cracking along in 20 knots of wind and it being grey and misty, and we can't actually see land at the moment, even though we're actually only a mile or two off land. Can't see a thing. It's got a couple of tacks to do up this strait, and then we'll find somewhere sheltered for the evening so we don't have to sail through the night. It looks like it's going to be a bit more breezy tomorrow, so we might just stay there for a couple of days and then sail on the following day when hopefully it'll be more of a reach instead of tacking upwind. But at least we're protected here by the big island from the open ocean, so the sea state's actually, for 20 knots of wind, very good. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
It's on standby.
Okay.
Ready to tack?
Tack it now.
12 miles to the anchorage.
Anytime we are close enough to see the coast, we're keeping our eyes peeled in the hope of seeing a polar bear. They're known to roam along the shoreline in summer, scavenging for any dead whales, seals or walrus that may have washed up.
Yeah, you ready when you are?
Okay, time for now.
We thought this would be an ideal opportunity to show you what we do and what we're wearing to keep warm up here in the Arctic. When we're sailing, we have the washboards out mostly so that it's easy to get in and out of the cabin, which means that the cabin is at the same temperature as outside. So once we pull into anchor, put the washboards in, shut the hatch, and we turn the diesel heater on to bring the temperature of the cabin up to a more comfortable temperature. But when we're sailing, we are wearing a lot of layers. Now you'll notice that everything we wear is from Gill. We're fortunate enough to be ambassadors for Gill, which means we get to try all of their kit, and including testing some kit they're developing for future seasons. So we're not trying to make an advert for Gill here. We do love their kit, but what we're trying to do here is share what we're wearing and how much we're wearing to stay warm up here in the Arctic. On the outer layer, we're using Gill's OS1 kit, which is their top line kit for ocean sailing. If we're looking for a jacket for sailing up here in higher latitudes, things we look for are the high collar, because although the air temperature up here in the summer isn't too bad, the wind chill with the wind blowing off of the glaciers is bitter. So having a high neck that you can snuggle down into, we find a real advantage. And the other thing is a jacket which doesn't have a thick lining or insulation. We like the ones that are just a waterproof outer shell, and that means that when you do get anything wet, it's easier to dry out. Up here on board on a small boat, there isn't a lot of space to dry any damp kit out. If these get wet when it's been raining or we get some spray on us, then we'll hang these over a winch in the cockpit to leave them to dry. And then the same with the offshore trousers. Again, these don't have a lining. That makes them much easier to put on when you're getting thrown around in a seaway, because the lining doesn't bunch up. It's much easier to put your foot through and get dressed without falling over. We've been wearing these pretty much all of the time that we're sailing. They're really good for keeping the wind chill off, and also to keep all our mid layers and base layers completely dry, so we don't have the problem of trying to dry them out. One extra tip for sailing up here, it may sound obvious, but I've got this one in one size bigger than I would normally have, so my coastal jacket is only a medium, and I wear that when I don't feel I need lots of layers on, if it's not so cold, like when we were sailing up through the Caledonian Canal on the way here. But then once up here I've got this, which is a large, allows me to fit a lot more layers underneath.
Thanks. So this is what we're wearing underneath our outer shell, and it's a lot of layers. Starting with our hat, we just wear one thick hat. Occasionally if it's really cold we might even double that up. And I found an extra use for this bit that folds over in the Arctic, in that it also doubles
as an eye mask. So on the way here, I think neither of us took our beanies off for about 3 days. And then some of our absolute favourite bits of kit are a puffer jacket, and I'm actually wearing 2 puffer jackets, and one in a slightly larger size than the one below. They're both exactly the same, and I found that one of these layers kept me perfectly warm in the UK winter, but here in the Arctic, doubling them up just allows me to switch between either wearing 1 or 2, dependent on how cold it is. Mostly I'm wearing 2. And then I've got a very special jacket underneath my 2 puffer jackets. It's starting to warm up in here. I'm glad to take them off. And this jacket might look like a normal jacket, but it's actually a special heated jacket. Also never had one of these before, but inside this pocket there is a USB connection that we can attach to a battery pack, and this is especially useful when we're on watch and we've been sat in the cockpit for a long period of time, just mostly sat still, trying to shelter from the wind and the weather, and you're starting to get cold. You can just turn this on, and then once you've turned it on, you get the heat pads in the back, which act like having a hot water bottle, but without any of the bulk of a hot water bottle. It's super cozy, and I got addicted to this jacket as we were going up the Irish Sea and it started to get cold. And underneath that jacket, because that isn't the end of the layers, I have a regular fleece on today. Sometimes I wear a fleece, sometimes I wear a jacket which is just like a soft thermal top. And then underneath that fleece we get down to our base layers, and we wear the synthetic base layers, and we have multiple pairs of these, and we just find that they are easier to wash and dry than wool base layers, but they keep us really warm, and I wear these all of the time.
Now we're down below, I've exchanged my sailing boots for a nice pair of slippers, but on our lower half, when we're sailing, we are wearing a lot of layers still. So today I've got 3 layers on. I've got an outer type cargo trouser type. Very good socks, so ski socks or long socks that go all the way up your calf make a massive difference when you're on watch to keeping your feet warm. And then under that I've got 2 pairs of socks on. I've got a mid-layer pair of trousers, so these are kind of like a fleecy trouser, but they're fitted so that they fit underneath all the other trousers and they don't cause a problem sliding inside your offshore outer layers. And then under that I've got a base layer kind of thermal top, same as we wear on the top layer. So today 3 pairs of trousers, 2 pairs of socks because it's not too cold. When it's colder, an extra pair of trousers. I can't fit an extra pair of socks in boots, but I did get the boots slightly larger like the jacket so I could fit 2 pairs of socks in them. And then when we're just living on board and editing down below, we tend to just have still probably 2 pairs of trousers on, 2 layers on to keep warm. The diesel heater does a fantastic job. The boat's really starting to warm up now. She'll go from 8 degrees outside temperature to around 14-15 degrees inside temperature with the heater on in about 30 to 40 minutes. And then we tend to turn the heater off, and because of the insulation we've added to Florence, she stays warm for about 3 to 4 hours before maybe the temperature starts dipping again and we might turn the heater back on. We find a comfortable temperature with some layers on is 14, 15, 16 degrees.
Condensation's more of a problem on board than keeping warm, and so we try to reduce that as much as possible by opening a hatch above the galley when we're cooking to let all of the steam out, and also regularly wiping down sometimes just the windows because they obviously tend to condensate, and sometimes when it's particularly cold pretty much all of the surfaces on Florence sometimes are running with condensation. So we just have a small towel that we rub all of the surfaces down with, and then we wring that out and leave that to dry outside to try and get as much moisture out of the boat as possible.
Here in Svalbard, because you have to worry about polar bears, even if you're just going for a short walk ashore, you end up having to carry a lot more with you. So you've got the rifle, flares, and then we've got EPIRB, VHF, polar bear scaring devices, So the bags are a lot bigger and heavier than they would be normally when we just wander ashore with almost nothing, to be honest.
This beach is so cool, just covered in ice boulders. But the thing is, how dense they are is amazing. They're A, incredibly heavy, and then B, even if you try to smash them, it just doesn't work. Broke that one, not that one. It's these small bits of ice that actually worry me a lot on Florence, because you can see the bigger bergy bits, but they're so solid and they float with just a tiny bit of them above the surface. You can't really see them.
Sounds like the ice clinking in your glass of gin and tonic, but actually there's lots and lots of ice cubes being moved around by a wave that's been created by some more ice carving off of the glacier.
It was grey and rainy and poor visibility when we sailed in here, but when the weather cleared we saw this peninsula that sticks out in front of the glacier and thought it was a perfect opportunity for us to come ashore and spend some time watching the glacier without having to worry about the ice hitting Florence.
This glacier in particular has got loads of spikes that look like they're about to fall off, and you can hear it continuously rumbling whilst we're here, but I think a lot of that is bits falling off within it because there's just series of peaks and peaks and peaks as you go back. Some of it does fall off the front, but on this one it seems to be coming down in rubble, like rolling down the face into the water rather than large chunks all falling off in one go.
So we thought this would be a really relaxing place to sit because we've got really good views of the glacier and also really good views of potential approaching polar bears. But we've also got really good views of Florence in the anchorage, and we can see that the wind has changed direction and now all of the ice that was clear of the bay that she's in is now drifting quite rapidly towards her. So back to the boat and fend off some ice, I think.
This is a scenario that we had been worried about in our planning for Svalbard. We know the ice situation can change quickly, And ideally somebody would be left on board at all times to keep an eye on things. But with just 2 of us, leaving someone on board is not practical, so it was a risk we decided to take.
Okay. So this lot is all drifting down to Florence from the glacier, and it's only going to get worse, so we need to get the anchor up and get out of here straight away. It's not too far, thankfully, to open water.
It's amazing how quickly this bay has filled up with ice. We must have been out of sight of Florence for maybe an hour when we were walking up to the hill. But yeah, and the time it's taken us to come back, it's probably 2 hours total. And there was nothing in here when we left her. I think as well as the wind, there's also a current. There's quite a lot of water that flows from the glacier, and it seems to be sweeping it now all over to this side and around the bay. It won't be long before this beach ends up looking like the ice beach that we were looking at on the other side, I think.
We're towing the dinghy here, so we need to be extra careful, as she is only made of painted plywood and really doesn't want to be towed into any large lumps of ice.
That's a relief, we're out of the ice. It's pretty much clear all the way to the glacier from the other side of the bay now. It's all just drifted out and around to where we were.
I think it's a good job we didn't leave it too much longer to get back to the boat though. That is all going that way pretty quickly.
Escaping from the ice, we didn't go far. Just a few hundred metres to the other side of the spit, where we would be protected from the ice. And then it happened.
We just come around the corner and we dropped the anchor because we could get into about 5 meters of water, and I made us some lunch, some noodles and egg for lunch, and yeah, Matt just spotted a polar bear. Or maybe he could smell our lunch.
Cool. See him, so he's just gone below the ridge. That was amazing. One of the things to see in Svalbard, the polar bear. And we've been here a couple of weeks. We've been looking every time we're sailing along the shore. We've been looking. There's so many rocks that look like polar bears, bits of snow that look like polar bears. Just sat having lunch, keeping an eye on the shore. Suddenly this polar bear just strolled into view, strolled along the shore, sniffed the air. I think he knew we were there, he or she, and then disappeared into a ravine in the moraine. And now we can't see it anymore. I think we're going to take the boat round and see if we can see it on the other side, if it has gone this way. But that was amazing to see, but also quite scary as to how quickly it appeared out of nowhere and then disappeared. We were ashore only a few miles away down there a couple of hours earlier today. That would have been very scary to meet ashore.
Oh, that was absolutely amazing. It's a shame it was such a fleeting glimpse of one. And I knew that their sense of smell was really good, but it also seems that their hearing is amazing, because every time I took a photo, it seemed like the bear could hear the shutter of my camera and it looked up and to see what I was doing. Absolutely incredible.
With the polar bear box ticked without being eaten, there was one more item we wanted to tick off before handing back our rifle and with it our ability to step ashore and explore.
One of the things that we were really keen to do here was to actually step foot onto a glacier, and this is the first that it's been quite easy to access the outer reaches of one, and so we are currently stood on top of a glacier. Feels really solid under our feet, and we're on a patch which is quite smooth. It's also really dark, but when you wipe away the sediment that's laying on top of the ice itself is crystal clear.
As you can see, we haven't actually come very far onto the glacier because we don't want the risk of falling into a crevasse or anything else. And the glacier is still moving. This one doesn't move as much, but earlier this morning we did hear one rumble. That's the only rumble we've heard whilst we've been here. So it is still moving and we don't want to go too much further onto it.
Having successfully set foot on a glacier that meets the water, we headed back to Longyearbyen to hand our rifle back into the hire shop.
From the time of its discovery in the 1500s, the Svalbard archipelago, then known as Spitsbergen, had been a free land, not belonging to any nation. People of many countries came here to participate in fishing, whaling, mining, and even tourism.
Not being part of any country meant there were no laws, taxes or governance on the archipelago, and that led to conflicts. The finding of extra mineral deposits in the 20th century and further conflicts created the need for a government, and the Spitsbergen Treaty was signed in 1920, giving Norway sovereignty over the archipelago, but with certain limitations. There are now 48 countries signed to the treaty.
Under the terms of the treaty, Norway governs the archipelago, but any taxes collected in Svalbard must only be used within Svalbard. No military bases or use for warlike activities are allowed, and Svalbard remains an entirely visa-free zone, which helps us because it's not part of the Schengen time limits. Citizens from the signed countries have equal rights of residency and to fish, hunt or engage in commercial activities in Svalbard.
There are people of many nationalities living and working in Longyearbyen, but Russia is the only country to take advantage of the treaty and build its own town and infrastructure here. This Russian town of Barentsberg has the only operational coal mine remaining on Svalbard.
As the coal mine is no longer commercially viable, the town is trying to convert to tourism. But we saw almost as many Arctic foxes as we did people here. With the war in Ukraine, most cruise ships and charter companies are no longer visiting this Russian town. So it feels like a ghost town, especially compared to Longyearbyen. We only stopped here briefly to time our departure from Svalbard with a weather window to sail back to mainland Norway.
Next time we take Florence back out to sea and sail south for the fjords of mainland Norway. For extra updates in between these bi-weekly videos, and to find out what we're up to in real time, head over to Patreon and join the crew.
Continuing our voyage on Florence would not be possible without the support of our patrons. Thank you to all of you, and especially to our star patrons.